Today we're talking about used casebooks in law school. Can we trust them? Hey Legal Eagles, D. James Stone here, teaching you how to think like a lawyer so you can crush law school. I get asked a lot about whether you can get away with buying used casebooks in law school. Well, the short answer is yes, absolutely. There is no real reason why you should buy brand new casebooks in law school. But let's take a step back for a moment. In law school, you rarely have actual textbooks like you had in college or in high school. What you have instead are casebooks. Casebooks are compendiums of cases that have been handed down through the generations. Usually these are appellate opinions of actual cases that existed in some court system. Generally, the authors of casebooks try to condense these cases down, but in my experience, they rarely condense it that much. So for the most part, a casebook is simply just a collection of publicly available cases that you will use in your classes to discuss various different legal ideas. In my opinion, casebooks tend to be a bit of a ripoff. They are a compilation of public cases. Your law school almost certainly provides access to Westlaw or Lexis, which means that if you wanted to, if you had the case citation, you could just simply look it up on the internet. And even if not, you can look up those cases on Google Scholar for free. Of course, if you look up a case on Westlaw or LexisNexis, you'll get a bunch of analysis that might help you get through that case. But for the most part, these are simply compilations of cases that you can get in a legal database. And in fact, I highly recommend that you look up the cases, even if you have a casebook. Look them up in Westlaw or LexisNexis, because they will provide additional analysis. That's the whole point of the Westlaw headnote system and the Lexis notes system, is they summarize a lot of the main points, whether it's the facts or the legal concepts that you need to understand. So even if you have a casebook, you should look those cases up on a legal database to get additional analysis. And in fact, I did an entire video on this talking about the flipped method of reading cases, where you read your supplements first and read the cases in a legal database before you go into reading your cases in your casebook. It will make retaining the information and learning the information so much faster and better. I'll put a link to the video on the flipped method of reading cases in the comments below, so check that out. And in fact, when I was in law school, I hated bringing casebooks to class because each one weighs about 5 or 10 pounds. And if you have to have multiple classes in a day, that means you're bringing, 15 to 20 pounds in your backpack every single day. So instead, what I did is I had no hope about reselling my casebooks in the future. Instead, I just ripped out the pages for the cases that were being discussed that day, and I brought those to class. Or conversely, what you can do is you can go on Westlaw or Lexis, print out the specific case that you're going to talk about in class, and bring the printout to class, because you don't need to bring your casebook to class. Rarely do people actually refer to the actual case when you're discussing it in class. Maybe you're going to read a casebook in the library for studying purposes, but rarely do you actually need the casebook in class. So I was not afraid of just tearing the pages out of my casebook to save some weight in my backpack as I was walking to and from school. And, when it's on a hot day, that weight can add up. So your mileage may vary. You may not want to rip out the pages, but that's an option that you can do. Now, theoretically, a professor or an author of a casebook is supposed to go through those cases and whittle them down so that you don't have to deal with the entire case, but only the part of the case that deals with a specific legal concept that you're reading for a particular class. So, for example, if you're reading a contracts casebook, then you want contracts cases that only deal with a specific legal theory about that particular idea in contracts class. But in reality, I find that the authors of casebooks really rarely take out very much from the cases. They tend to be pretty lazy, and they tend to include most of the case that's going to be added to a casebook, especially when you're dealing with older cases. Because in older cases, the judges tended to be less verbose, the cases were less complex, and as a result, the opinions tended to be much, much smaller. So really, if you're dealing with older cases, which most law school classes do, then you're dealing with a much smaller case that doesn't need to have that much information removed from it. One student reached out to me and asked if he should buy new casebooks because he had heard that lawyers will use those casebooks in their practice once they graduate from law school. And that's just hilarious because no lawyer has ever used a casebook after their class ended. And in fact, all of that case law is out of date by the time that that casebook is printed. It's there simply to help explain the legal concepts in a particular class. And they're good examples to give you an idea of a particular theory or legal precept, but you can't use them in court because they're too old. You don't know if it's still good law, and often they're not still good law. So really no lawyer has ever used their casebook once they've graduated from law school. And if you did use your casebook for legal research, it would be malpractice. Lawyers are obsessed with making sure that they have the most current, up-to-date case law when they're using it in court. And you can get severely punished if you use out-of-date case law. So the value proposition of a casebook is that they are supposed to be highly edited. They're supposed to focus you on the particular study questions that you might be going over in class. But in my experience, authors rarely do much of anything to those cases, which means that you could simply look up those cases in your database of choice and get basically the same information. Which means at the end of the day, if you're paying $200 for your brand new casebook, it's essentially just a list of cases compiled together. And those are cases that you could get for free from a legal database. So now that being said, despite it being what I think is a ripoff, I would still buy casebooks in general. Just buy them used. Having that list of cases helps you when you're studying. It helps you look them up later on. So theoretically, one could get by without buying casebooks, but I think that's a bad idea. I think you should buy the casebooks simply so that you are working from the same cases that everyone else is, and you have a written copy of every single case that you have to read. But that being said, I would highly recommend buying them used if you can deal with someone's prior highlighting and their prior notes that are going to be in your casebook. Really, that's the only reason why I would ever buy a new casebook, is if I really found it hard to read a case with someone else's highlighting. Because if you buy a used casebook, then odds are people are going to go through and highlight almost every line. It's going to go through multiple generations, so there are going to be several people's highlighting and notes in the casebook. So as long as you can deal with some notes and some highlighting in the case, then I don't think you should have any reason to buy a new casebook. Save your money, buy used casebooks, and spend the difference on beer instead. You'll get much more mileage out of it. If you want additional information about how to read law school cases, how to outline, and how to prepare for class, check out this link where you can download a free guide to law school cases that I've put together. Also, if you like this video, please check out this playlist of videos. They're guaranteed to help you crush law school. And I'll see you in the next video.